All right, here we go. The lecture today online is the Electoral College system. A lot of this stuff we learned I don't know, some of this stuff we learned together in class. Yes, I need you to write notes based on this. Watch the other videos that came before this in order to get a better understanding and to be able to answer some of the questions. Let's get started. Okay, so the Electoral College system is the system in which we elect the president, and we've already learned before in class that different states are worth different points based on their population. It's a winner-take-all system. There has been a lot of criticism of this system. You can probably count me among the people that are critical of this system. So anyway, why did we come up with it? Well, it was decided when we wrote our Constitution that we would do our system in this way. Part of it was our founding fathers worried that early America would have poor access to information as a result of bad communication. For instance, let's say you found out one of the guys running for president was a criminal or something, but they were really popular a month ago, and it was going to take a long time for word to get out that this person was a criminal. If we put together these electors and send them to Washington, D.C., they would be like an elite group that would have a better idea of information relevant to the election. I get it. For back then, it makes sense. I don't think it makes much sense for today, but luckily, 95% of the time, it hasn't caused too much of a problem. There was also this desire to have the best people select the president, and there was a fear that the common man could be swayed by demagogues. A demagogue is a person who's a political person who uses people's passions and their prejudices in order to earn the vote. See if you can think of anybody like that, maybe running in today's election. Oh. And this was also a compromise by those who wanted a direct election and those who wanted Congress to pick the president. So this is kind of like, well, we'll let the people vote. They'll think they have a say, but we'll have the final say. All right. Okay, so each state has as many electoral votes as it has members in Congress. So that means that every state would have to have 3 at least, because there are 2 senators in every state and there's at least 1 House of Representatives congressman in every state. So that means that Wyoming and North Dakota, these are states have 3 people. California has 55 because we have so many people that live here. And if you add up all the places together, you get to 538 votes. We gave Washington, D.C. 3 votes when we passed the 23rd Amendment. Before that, their votes did not count for president. So there's actually a lot of people that live in Washington, D.C. So they got a little more votes. Certainly their vote counts for more than, say, somebody in California. If you watch the CGP Gray videos before mine, you know that part of the problem with this system is that not everybody's vote counts for the same, and that people in a small state, their vote counts for more than people in a big state. One more thing down here, we see, maybe I could write on the screen. We see that a lot of people are moving from the Rust Belt to the Sun Belt. I have a map on the following slide that better explains this. This is overall the Electoral College map. I actually think I have a better one later in the PowerPoints. This is the Sun Belt. I guess you can picture why it's called that. This area gets more sun than the rest of the country. More people are moving to this area and moving out of this area here. This is the Rust Belt. So what do you need to know? That the states in the South, their vote is increasing as more people move there and the Electoral College has changed. You need to know that because of population changes, every 10 years we do a census where we count how many people live in each state, and they add up those numbers, and then they recalculate and see, is California still worth 55? Is it maybe worth 56 now? So the census helps us recalculate. And you should know that this area is growing in population, and this area is not so much. Probably because of all the jobs that used to be over here, but they are no longer over here. So people are going down here. So the people in the Electoral College they're actual people, and they cast their vote based on the way that a state decided. I guess, though, there's no constitutional implement that says they have to vote that way. And I think CGP Gray said that in the past, sometimes they've gone against that. But I think in modern day America, it would be really scandalous and it would be a really big deal if somebody did not vote the way that their state wanted them to. But I guess it still is a possibility that it could happen. All right, how do you win electoral votes? The candidate with the most popular votes, all you need is a plurality, wins all of the state's electoral votes. So let's say you have California over here. This is my California, and it's worth 55 points. And you have Clinton running. Clinton gets 35% of the vote. You have Ross Perot running. Ross Perot gets 29% of the vote. You have Mr. Robinson. He runs and he gets 5% of the vote. And then you have George H.W. Bush, and he runs and he gets 31% of the vote. So Bill Clinton is going to get all of the 55 points that California is worth, even though he only had a plurality of the votes. He didn't actually get over 50%. So that's a vocab word I think we already know. And we have a winner-take-all system in this country, so if you get the highest number in a state, you get all of that state's points. Only 2 states in the country have chosen to split up their votes based on the way that people voted. So I might have them later, but I think it's like Nebraska and stuff. So if Nebraska's worth 6 points in this case, they'd give like, I don't know, 2 to the first guy, and then they'd spread out the rest of the votes. But almost none of the other states actually do that. So what does this lead to? What does this lead to? It leads to an emphasis on swing states. Swing states are those states you drew on your map with the colors where they don't always go Democrat or Republican. They're kind of like up in the air. That's like Florida, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Michigan. These are states that are not consistent. That means if I'm running for president, I'm going to spend a lot of time and a lot of money in those states. And then the people in these electors in the Electoral College, they meet in December to cast their ballots based on how those states voted. So this is a map you are already familiar with, but we'll look at it again. So you know that Florida is a swing state, Ohio, Pennsylvania are swing states, Virginia. The big ones though right here are Florida and Ohio. If you win Ohio, you've won the election something like 96% of the time or something crazy. So winning those states really, really matters if you want to be the president. Sadly, what that means is that almost nobody ever visits us, nobody ever visits Texas, because they already know how we're going to vote. This is actually a good visual example of what I was just talking about. So these little hands are how often you get visited. So you see California only had 2 visits during the Bush and Kerry campaign. But look at how many visits Florida gets, how many visits Ohio gets, Pennsylvania, Iowa, Wisconsin, Michigan. So the states that are undecided get a ton of visits. They also get a ton of money spent on them. Look at that. Nobody spent any money on California. Nobody spent any money on Texas. Nobody cares about the middle of America because we know how those states are going to vote. And so money is spent on the states that are really, really close, the contested states. All right, in order to win the election, you need to receive 270 votes. That's a little bit over half of the 538 total votes that are available. If no candidate has a majority, this is important, then we're going to let the House of Representatives basically vote on the president. They're going to pick from among the top 3 candidates. In this situation, every state would have 1 vote, so it's not really the House so much, because California would just be worth 1, Wisconsin would just be worth 1. This was done 2 times, in 1800 and 1824. This is weird, but the Senate would select the vice president from among the top 2 candidates. This is kind of crazy. I don't know what they would have to do in this situation, because what that would mean is you'd have like a Republican president and a Democrat vice president or something like that, which would be totally crazy. Okay, so now we're just looking at interesting elections in American history. We'll look at the first election, Washington versus Adams. Poor John Adams got his butt kicked, and he lost the election receiving no electoral votes. So every single state went to Washington. Okay, so this is the election of 1824. Just for fun, let's look. You needed, if you see this over here, you needed 131 electoral votes to win. And you see that Jackson had 99, Adams had 84, these guys down here didn't get enough. And so it went to the House of Representatives, and the House of Representatives selected John Adams as the next president of the United States. So, interesting. It showed that it was the first election where the guy that got the most electoral votes did not win the election. I don't think this election matters because of the electoral vote. I just think it's interesting to see Abraham Lincoln's election and you compare the North vote versus the South vote. I like to show you elections where one guy absolutely dominated. So this is during the Great Depression. Well, the Great Depression had just begun under Herbert Hoover, and he was running against Franklin Roosevelt, and look at Roosevelt won every state except for a little bit, so he whooped him. This is an election in 1964. You have the Democrat Lyndon Johnson versus Republican Barry Goldwater, and I think that I have this one on here because this is whenever the South starts to become more Republican, and pretty much ever since this election, in every election they have voted for the Republican nominee. This is another election that was a whooping. This one's really embarrassing. This is Ronald Reagan. He got 525 electoral votes versus Walter Mondale got 13. Ouch. Okay, so what are the problems with the Electoral College system? Well, you can have a president that didn't get 50% of the vote. That's kind of a problem. We've seen that happen before. And if you have strong third-party candidates like Ross Perot or who's that guy from Ralph Nader from the Green Party, normally you have these 2 guys that run right here that are close, but a third-party candidate can eat away some of the votes from the other one. And there's a possibility of a president that got the least amount, or got a lesser amount of votes. So the most recent example of this is in the year 2000, George W. Bush. He became president even though he lost the popular vote. So you can actually not get as many votes as the guy running on the other side, but you got more electoral votes. That was the whole 2000 election where it all came down to Florida. Speaking of the 2000 election, this is George Bush versus Al Gore. Look at that. He just barely got to his 270. Look at Gore. He was at 266. It all came down to Florida. It all came down to 500 votes. So don't think that your vote doesn't matter. It does matter. Look at the popular vote. Gore won the popular vote, but he lost the election to Bush because Bush won more of the electoral vote. This is just a note that says that the electors that we have that go vote based on the way we voted, that there's nothing requiring them to vote the way that the state asked them to vote. That makes us a little nervous. If you watch the CGP Gray video, you know that small states are overrepresented in the Electoral College, like Wyoming has 3 electoral votes, but that would average out to 1 vote every 166,000 people. California, we average out to 1 vote every 600,000 people, so that's not really fair, I would say. Maybe if you live in one of these small states, you love the Electoral College, but if you live in California, you don't feel like the Electoral College is very fair. But that's why it's unlikely we would ever be able to change the Constitution, because remember, we need the states to agree on changing the Constitution to get rid of the Electoral College. Well, why would a state like Montana, North Dakota, South Dakota, Wyoming, why would they agree to hurt their voice in an election? This is just a blown up. It's kind of cool actually. It's a map that's made based on the state's power in an election for the president, based on their population, but also based on their number in the Electoral College, basically. So you see, these states are bigger than they should be. California is big, but it's smaller than it should be. It should be even bigger. Up here, this just says if the election ever went to the House of Reps, like if somebody didn't get 270 votes, then it becomes really ridiculous how much power small states would have, because Wyoming's vote would count the same as California's vote. That's kind of scary. And also, this is one of the biggest things I hate, is the Electoral College. It hurts the development of third parties. For instance, Ross Perot won 19% of the vote in 1992. And all he did was hurt George Bush and kept George Bush from winning the election. And so it hurts third parties from starting, because everybody decided, well, I'm not going to vote for third party again because I just threw away my vote. And it hurts Ross Perot because he didn't win any of the Electoral College, but he got 1 out of 5 votes in the election. That's pretty good. But he got basically 0 electoral votes. Is that fair? This is that election that I use as an example a lot of plurality. So Clinton won a plurality. He didn't win over 50%, but he beat out the 37 and the 19% of the other guys running. These two people were very similar in their ideologies, and so if you had gotten rid of Perot, Bush probably would have won the election. If you'd gotten rid of Bush, Perot probably would have won the election, but because they were both running, it allowed Clinton to win, and it's kind of a failure of our system a little bit. What are some alternatives we could have? Well, we could just have the direct election where every person's vote would be equal to every other person's vote. Wow. That sounds insane. It sounds like a great idea, actually. You could have a district system where a candidate who wins a congressional district wins that district's vote. That sounds kind of complicated, though, because you'd have 2 votes left over. You could have a proportional system where the candidate gets the same percentage of electoral votes as the popular vote. That seems a little bit most. You could keep the electoral system, but get rid of these electors. I think this one sounds like a good idea. Why have we not gotten rid of the Electoral College system? Well, we don't want to tamper, I guess, maybe with the Constitution. It's really difficult to change a Constitution. Small states would never agree to changing the Constitution because why would they agree to hurt their power? And then lastly, opposition from urban racial minorities. A concentration of racial minorities in swing states gives them the clout to tip the scales towards their favorite candidate. Notes are done. Answer the quiz questions. Have a nice day. Ignore this slide. I just accidentally left it on there.